This is TWiT.
I know you got some stuff that you want to say about this, and I'm glad. What happened was the news was this morning was that the Washington, D.C. Court of Appeals rejected the FCC's proposal for their implementation or their rulings on net neutrality. And the Boy Genius Report story was gloom and doom, but Tech Dirt did an article which explained that it's not as bad as it looks. That essentially what the D.C. Court of Appeals was saying was that the FCC didn't have the authority under the provisions that they were attempting to exercise it, but that they probably do have the authority in some other, like by taking some other approach. So it wasn't that it was dead forever, but that they just didn't ask right.
The issue has been all along an issue of jurisdiction, pure and simple. So, of course, we want net neutrality. You and I and anybody sensible listening to this show loves the idea that I don't even like the term net neutrality because it doesn't say it. What we want is no discrimination on the net. We want bits to be equal. We don't want internet service providers to say, well, I'm going to let YouTube go through, but TWiT, I want to slow them down. We don't want discrimination. That's how the net was designed. The FCC has in its mandate, it's part of their broadband plan. They also want to fight for net neutrality. The issue is, and this is what Verizon, this case was a lawsuit by Verizon. Verizon asserted the FCC doesn't have jurisdiction. For instance, they don't have jurisdiction over TWiT. It's a podcast. They have jurisdiction over my radio show. It's a broadcast. In this case, the issue is a broadband service provider a common carrier? So the FCC regulates common carriers, telcos, radio stations, stuff like that. And up to now, the FCC has not said that broadband, and there's good reasons for them not to say that the broadband providers are not common carriers. Even though Verizon is a common carrier in wireless telephony, they're not in wireless data. So that's what the court's saying. According to your own rules, you don't have jurisdiction. However, the court says the FCC does have the right to oversee the internet. So they're not saying no. The court said that the 1996 Telecommunications Act, quote, vests the FCC with affirmative authority to enact measures encouraging the deployment of broadband. It even said that the agency reasonably interpreted the law to empower it to promulgate rules governing broadband providers. But, and that was the good news, the bad news is the way they're doing it, they don't have jurisdiction.
Right.
But the attorney who represented the FCC did say, well, we know now where our jurisdiction lies. I'm still worried about the FCC because, you know, the new chairman is a former cable company executive. That bothers me a little bit.
Yeah. And I'm worried that there's any thinking or logic to the idea that, well, consumers have a choice in how we get our broadband connectivity. That's absolutely not the case.
Right. And that's because of the FCC, frankly, that awarded, in effect, monopolies to the cable company and the phone company. Now, in this case, we're talking about wireless internet. We're talking about, Verizon we're talking about cell phones. And even Google said that broadband should be treated differently on a cell phone carrier than it should be on a cable company. The thinking being that there are some actual physical constraints to the bandwidth available on a cell phone, right? Because they have to get the data out to each head end individually. There's lots of technical reasons why it might not be regulated the same way a cable company is. This is a deeper, much deeper question than just this decision. This decision doesn't change really that much. It gives, in some ways, the FCC more direction about how it should proceed.
Right. Like, okay, strike one, try again.
Right. And the court seemed to me, and I'm not an expert, to be supportive of the idea of net neutrality. The judge who wrote the decision said internet service providers can damage players on the edge.
Good.
So he recognized that there is a public interest in protecting neutrality on the net.
Yeah, I think there's only one way this can ultimately turn out, and that's the way we believe it should. That even if it stumbles and there are some mistakes made along the way, I just think that the idea of allowing an ISP to discriminate in any fashion about the way you're connected to the internet is doomed to failure, much as they may want to.
Well, and they protest. I mean, Verizon says, "Oh, we don't want to harm the internet." But look what AT&T's doing with their subsidized broadband plans. They're saying, "Hey, if Netflix wants to pay your broadband bill, then we won't count it against your cap. But if TWiT doesn't, then we will." And that's what I mean. Why net neutrality isn't a good way to express it. Internet discrimination is the way to do it. If you don't pay us, if you don't subsidize our customers' broadband bill, then I'm sorry, we can't, we're going to have to count it against the customer. So that's, I do expect the FCC to get involved in this. The court, the judge further wrote, the commission, FCC, has adequately supported and explained its conclusion that, absent rules such as those set forth in the Open Internet Order, broadband providers represent a threat to internet openness and could act in ways that would ultimately inhibit the speed and the extent of future broadband deployment. The court sent a very clear message.
Yeah.
Don't do this. Now, in this particular case, you're going to have to do it differently, FCC. But we're watching you broadband providers. It's good.
That was some good language.
Yeah, it's a good decision. I don't think it's a bad decision. But it doesn't mean we're done.
Right.
You know what? We're never going to be done.